Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about taking risks. I'm going to do this on a fun Friday because it's not directly about game development, but of course all my stories are game development related because it's all I've ever done. But what I've noticed is, especially recently, more and more people are going, developers need to take more risks. Why aren't they taking more risks? A lot of them say it very flippantly. Like, come on, just take a risk. Why are you guys so cautious? Just take some risks. And I even have 2 videos on game development caution. And I'll link those below. So you can kind of see this video as maybe the other side. I know a lot of people linked those videos and did reaction videos and argued for or against them. I'm now going to kind of take the other side and say, let's talk about risk and what it means to take risk in the game development sphere. And I'm going to probably oversimplify it down to 2 things, which I'll call the 2 S's. Self-confidence and situation. That's what you need to take risks. Self-confidence is pretty straightforward. You need to be sure about your ideas, not just for your own sake, but for anybody you're working with. They have to have some confidence that this is the right thing to do. You also, though, have to be able to resist attacks, and I'm using that word correctly, from publishers, from other developers, from game players and game fans who will attempt to tear down your idea. Sometimes objectively, hey, your idea is not going to work well and here's why. Sometimes subjectively, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. Why are you coming up with dumb ideas? You're dumb. So that's the self-confidence side you need. Now let's talk about the situation side. This is where things get complicated, and I don't think people look into this as much. If you're going to take risks in game development, you have to be able to take that risk. Which means accepting the failure. Which means if your idea doesn't pan out, are you okay with not making a game or making a game that sells really badly? And I'm not just talking about monetarily, I'm talking about the time you spent and the other things you could have done, because doing one thing means you didn't do another. A lot of people simply aren't in a situation to take risk like that. Maybe they're using someone else's money to do development, and that person doesn't want the risk taken. Maybe they're responsible for other people's employment. I've talked about how when I had to shut down Troika, there was this immense feeling of guilt that there were all these people who were dependent on Troika for employment, and I was closing it down, which is one reason I didn't want to run a company again. Or if you're soloing, maybe you can't solo because you need to have a steady income. You need insurance. It could be for your own personal situation. You need it for rent. You need it for food. Maybe it's family. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you're taking care of an elderly parent. And you have to have income or you have to have insurance. Whatever it is, you just may not be in a situation to be able to take risks. And I think anybody who's done solo development already knows those 2 S's very well. And I've never done solo development, but I've made a lot of stuff on my own. Early in my career, when I'd come home from Interplay on nights and weekends, I was making all kinds of stuff. That's where some of the early engines came from. That's where my operating system abstraction libraries came from. It was all personal code that ended up folding into a game at work, and then it became Interplay's code, and now I don't have it anymore. But I want to talk about why could I take risks early in my career? Why was that something that I could do? Well, first of all, I got very lucky early on with people who just believed in me. The first game company I worked at, Pegasus, which became Cybron, and we made Grand Slam Bridge, they liked a tool I made for them, an art tool for the Atari, and which I did as a contractor. I made it for the Atari 800, and then they hired me. So that was really cool. At Interplay, I worked on several projects, but then I got put in charge of my own project. But let me tell you, I already had 2 programming degrees, a bachelor's and a master's. I had played a ton of games, not just video games, but board games and tabletop role-playing games. And I had been in the game business for over a decade. In fact, I'd been in the game industry for 13 years before I got put in charge of Fallout. Fallout happened in 94. I started in the industry in 81. So it took 13 years before I got a project that I was in charge of. And at that point, I was pretty confident. I had an academic basis. I had an experiential basis in both gaming and the game development industry. So I was ready to do a product and my own project, and that was Fallout, and it worked. So now we've established, if you believe me now about the self-confidence and the situation being two most important things, let me talk about why that doesn't always happen now. First of all, the people with the money, when we're talking money, we're not talking a few $100,000 or maybe $1 million. We're talking tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And the people who want to put that into a game don't necessarily want to take a huge risk. It's just, if you fail, the consequences of failure are huge. So that's why there's a lot of caution. Personally, I'm not in a position to risk as much anymore as when I was younger. When I was younger, I didn't have a mortgage. My health was fine. You don't realize that when you're in your 20s that your health is like flawless. And you don't have any debts, and you're not, I wasn't married. I didn't have anything to worry about in that regard. That's not the case anymore. So there's that. But also, that's all situational stuff. Let's take a look at the confidence stuff. You'd think my confidence would get higher and higher. But just take a look at the 2 years I've been making videos here. There's almost 600 videos. And don't misunderstand me. Most of the comments are overwhelmingly positive. But there's still negative ones in there. And in sheer number, there's a lot of negative ones. And it sometimes makes other people in the industry ask me, why are you doing this? Why do you open yourself up for attack like this? And I do have a video called Why Other People Don't Make Channels Like This. But I usually tell them this video is nothing compared to 44 years in the game industry, where I've heard personal insults and snide comments and sarcasm, demoralizing feedback, degrading feedback from publishers, from other game developers, from bosses, from people working for me, from players, from supposed fans. So I've been through all that, and I get it. But at some point you go, you know what? Enough is enough. I've done this for years. Maybe it's time for someone else to take risks. Maybe it's time to not only like pass this on to someone else and go, okay, I did this when I was young. It's your turn. And this kind of leads me into the final thing, which is, how about you? Why don't you take some risks? Instead of complaining about games that are coming out and complaining about what other people have done, why don't you do something? Because if you're right, if you have all these great ideas and you're right, you're going to make a great game and everyone wins. And I'm sure right now you're thinking about that self-confidence stuff. Some of you I don't think have the self-reflection to understand that you're not confident. But you may be thinking, I don't have the right situation. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do art. I don't know how to do all these things. And I have videos on that where I'm like, there are engines out there. There's art you can buy. There's scripts you can buy. There's a lot of AI coding assistance that you can get. You can do this. You're choosing not to. So the whole point of this video is I want you to think about that the next time you complain about a developer not taking risks, because it's not your money and it's not your confidence, and you seem unwilling to do that yourself. So maybe, I'm not saying don't make complaints. I have a whole video on how to give good feedback, but maybe you want to think about how high you dial it up before you complain about other people not taking risks, because taking risks are difficult and have a cost. And if you don't have those two S's, if you're not self-confident and in a good situation to take a risk, it's not going to happen. So I hope this makes sense. I hope this makes a good companion video to those caution ones. And I hope you guys have a good Friday.